Joining us now is Kelly Hyman, a Democratic strategist, attorney, and a media commentator. So, Kelly, when we look at what's happening right now, I think a lot of people understand that there may be some hypocrisy going both ways, but at the end of the day, it seems like Republicans do have the constitutional authority to not only for the president to appoint a Supreme Court nominee, but then for Senate Republicans to vote on that nominee. Do you think that that is true?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And yes, I do. We think about in 2016, Obama at the time did have the opportunity to nominate someone, but the Senate didn't do anything about it. And so now, about in 2016, they're basically saying that, oh, no, we need to wait until there's a new president. But now in 2020, it's okay to go through and have the person be nominated and also be consent by the Senate.
So I think the main thing that really separates the two instances as well is the fact that right now Republicans have control of the upper chamber and the presidency as well. So that's why they're allowed to follow through on this, whereas in 2016 that was not the case. But it does raise an interesting point that I know a lot of Democrats are proposing right now, and it's the idea that once Democrats, if I should say, they do get power of the White House and the Senate and hold the House, that they should consider stacking the courts. That should be their way of almost diluting the conservative majority on the court as well. Is that something that you would agree with in retribution?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think a lot of Democrats do not support that, and Biden has come out and said that he doesn't support that as well. Because once you have the change of power, then the other side will make changes as well. So I don't think that that's a reasonable solution. It'd be nice if the parties would come together and unite our country and work together.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that from a lot of people, actually. You're exactly right, because who's to say then that Republicans can't just add 10 seats when they take power and it goes back and forth forever? And I think when you start messing with the courts too much, I think that's something that a lot of politicians fear and a lot of Americans fear as well. That is maybe the one part of our political discourse today that has some semblance of objectivity in some way. So I think that is something that they do want to hold on to. But there are different avenues for Democrats as well. And one of them, as of recently, has been the idea of giving statehood to places such as Washington, D.C., or Puerto Rico, which would, I'm assuming, come with them 2 additional Senate seats for each one of those new states. That might be a little bit more complex to reach because I believe you need a supermajority in order to change an amendment to the Constitution or anything like that. But do you think that should be maybe the route that Democrats do go as opposed to stacking the courts?
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point. I always support, I believe that DC and Puerto Rico should be, a state. No taxation without representation, and they should be represented. Everyone in our country should be represented. However, it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think that the Senate seats is really the thing that kind of throws that into disarray, because I think that there are a lot of Republicans who would actually agree, especially when it comes to Puerto Rico. When you say no taxation without representation, I think that's something that resonates among a lot of people, because they could look at that exact situation and look at what has happened, for example, when it comes to hurricanes. I mean, they do bear a lot of the brunt when it comes to natural disasters. They are Americans. I mean, they are people who take part in our elections. They do everything, but they don't get the representation. So I think that is something to keep an eye on, too. The senators is just the one thing that I think could hold that up. But when we talk about the possible retribution from the Democratic Party as well for filling the Supreme Court seat, another thing that's being talked about is doing away with the filibuster. And that is one thing that maybe the same way as stacking the courts comes as good news for many progressives. But I know a lot of moderates are a little bit more on the fence about that prospect. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think that whoever gets power, it's going to be the changing of the guards. So, if you have that, it's basically free reign. I think that we need to work together, both the Democrats and the Republicans, and come together and work together to unite our country. And I'm hopeful that Biden, if elected, which I do believe he will unite our country and bring us back together. Because as you know, most of us agree on most issues. And there's just a few of us, that don't agree. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that we need someone like that and that we'll have that.
And, I am optimistic that we will eventually turn that corner as well and get back to a place where there's more unity in the country, more things that we see in common as opposed to the differences. But it seems like this is not the moment. It seems like right now we are still divided. It seems like even within the parties themselves, there's fractures and divisions. The progressive moderate divide on the Democratic side, and on the Republican side, the Trumpism versus the anti-Trumpism as well. Do you see this gap bridging anytime soon, or do you think that there's still a couple of years of hardship and battle before there's ever any sense of unity in this country?
Well, I believe if Biden will be elected, he definitely will. He's a moderate Democrat, and so he brings over some Republicans as well. He has a strong support in the Republicans, and so I think that he will. However, I think that Trump's MO is to divide us and talk to his base and just focus on them. So if Trump is reelected, I think it's going to definitely take some time for our country to heal.
You know, I'm a little bit more hesitant about Republicans going to Biden after this Supreme Court situation, especially if the seat is left open going into the election, because I think that this is something that even the Mitt Romneys of the world, for example, who are no fans of President Trump, can look at this and say, you know what? At the end of the day, though, this is something that is more generational, more transformative. Maybe I could put up with President Trump for 4 more years if they're not fans of his for the sake of a lifetime appointment. So I think that this is the conversation that'll be had over the next couple of weeks, especially as they try to fill that seat or try to deal with the political ramifications as well. But Kelly Hyman, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, breaking down the other side of this argument, because I think it's very important to know it going into this battle. Thank you.